Welcome to the long overdue update for Blue Sky Aces, a retro World War I flight simulator. For those that are new here, Blue Sky Aces is aimed at what some people refer to as the simcade flight simulator market. It aims to be authentic to World War I aircraft, but without overwhelming you with switches and dials and all the weird quirks that these aircraft had. Fun is definitely at the core of this game, with lots of huge dogfights and detailed maps to explore. I can barely believe it's been a year since my last video update, and it feels like it has just flown by, with so many changes going on. It's definitely been a very long slog though, with so many massive changes to so many elements of the game and a lot of rework. There's been a lot of times when I've questioned the decision to change the game's art style, but it's totally been worth it. Now let's get on with the good bits. The biggest piece of work over the last year has been the change in art style. This work wasn't really on the roadmap, but we kept finding that we were constantly fighting the old art style every time we tried to do anything. While the faceted low poly art style looks like it would be really efficient to render, at large scales it actually is less efficient than the new style. The reason for this is it's more efficient to add detail with textures than it is with geometry. While we're relying more on textures now, it's important to point out that we're deliberately keeping the texture resolution low and pixelated to keep that retro style. The greatest benefit of the new art style is that we can now fill the world with way more detail. Just look at the difference between the old map versus the new one. The thing that stands out the most is the trees, as there's just so many more of them, and their canopies fill up much more space than before. We can do this because the new trees use an old cross-style billboard, which only contains 3 quads per tree, compared to the old trees which had hundreds of polygons each. They're also rendered using a technique called instance rendering, where they're grouped by type and location and then rendered in batches to reduce draw calls. They also have a custom shader that fakes the lighting and reduces the colour opacity as they get further away to help them blend into the terrain better. The buildings have also had a massive overhaul, and again we're relying more on textures to add detail and reduce the poly count. This had to be the single biggest challenge of the whole process, and I lost count of how many failed attempts we had to get this looking good. The biggest challenge wasn't technical, it was getting the town layouts to look believable without having to manually place every single building by hand, and without having to create hundreds of building variations. The other part of this work was to make the buildings destructible. As let's face it, what's the point of dropping bombs if you can't blow stuff up? Every building in the game can now be destroyed, which will add a lot more variety to the game by opening up more mission types. The airfields have had yet another refresh, with new tent and hangar models. I've lost count of how many times I've redone these, but they do look good now. Most of the other units in the game have also had big model updates, including the balloons, trucks and trains. The trenches have also had an overhaul, but this is one area where I feel there's probably some more work to do to make them look more authentic. The real World War I trenches were incredibly complex structures that were truly massive in scale, and I don't think the current implementations do them justice yet. I feel that I'll be revisiting these again at some point in the future. Something that's new is the flak guns, which have been added to create more atmosphere. During the war, the flak guns were known as the great consumers, due to the huge numbers of shells that were required on average to shoot down a single aircraft. This was because the only real aiming method that they had was the old Mark I eyeball. Operators needed to manually lead the target and set the timed fuse based on an estimated distance, so hitting anything was mostly about luck. Because of this, I've deliberately made the flak inaccurate, so in practice they shouldn't hit you very often, if at all. Although this new art style is more efficient, it still required a lot more optimization work, as there's just so much more to render now. I leaned heavily into Unity's low-level culling group API to help with rendering optimizations, as it provides way more control over what happens when objects go in and out of view, or move between distance bands. One of the surprising performance issues I found was the physics system, as having colliders on every tree is really expensive, and causes huge lag spikes when shifting the floating origin. The solution was to extend the use of the culling group concept to disable colliders on faraway objects. This made a big difference, and is why I'd recommend anyone who's using Unity to investigate this API. It is just so much more flexible than the built-in LOD system. I came up with a really terrible joke/motto when I was working on this. If a plane flies through a tree and no one sees it, then it didn't happen. Sorry, I told you it was terrible. One really perplexing issue I had was with mission load times, which had ballooned out to over 2 minutes on slower computers. I spent over a week trying to figure out what was causing this, and just as I was about to give up after another fruitless night, I thought to check the Unity player logs, only to discover that they were absolutely massive. After a few minutes of investigation, I discovered the problem. I had an editor script that was being excluded from the build, and Unity was logging about a page of logs for each time it couldn't find it. And it was attached to every single tree, building, road, and numerous other objects within the map. Needless to say that when I fixed this, the load times dropped to a few seconds. The motto of this story is check the player logs. While I've worked really hard to get the game running as efficiently as I can, one thing that I'd love some help with is some feedback from anyone who's played the demo on a low-spec machine. So if you've got a snail-like CPU with barely enough RAM to run Windows and an integrated GPU, then please drop a comment below and let me know your specs and how it runs. I'm really keen to keep the game accessible to a wide range of computers, so any help on this would be greatly appreciated, thank you. While I was busy working on the environment details, Curtin was busy updating the aircraft models. So far the DH2, Camel, Fokker E3 and Fokker DR1 have been completed, with a new port currently under development. The aim of this work is to get all the aircraft up to the same level, and to increase the detail within the cockpit. We haven't got working gauges yet, but that's something that will be coming. We're also adding more animations to the various elements within the cockpit, such as the weapons and control columns. And at some point we'll update the pilot models too, as the current ones are looking pretty terrible. Overall, I'm really happy with how things are looking in this area, and I'm looking forward to updating the new port next. One of the other aircraft that's been added is the Gotha G.V, one of Germany's large twin-engine heavy bombers that were used to bomb England. This raised some interesting challenges, as a lot of the older aircraft code didn't handle multiple engines properly, and couldn't handle damage correctly to them. The AI logic also needed to be adapted to behave differently when these bombers encountered enemy aircraft, as it wasn't appropriate for them to try and dogfight. Currently these are AI aircraft only, but you will be able to fly them in the future, and I will be creating a demo mission for them. In the meantime, you can fly against them in the mission builder. The last aircraft related change is the addition of wingmen to most of the missions. These are primarily there to provide moral support by giving you the impression that you're not quite as outnumbered as it looks. That said, they will dogfight and attack any target objectives for you. As part of this work, the AI aiming has been reworked to make them more consistent, especially between different difficulty levels. They are now capable of pulling lead much more accurately than they were previously. However, this required further changes to ensure that they aren't too accurate, especially on the normal and easy difficulty levels. Otherwise, you just really don't live very long. Well, that's it for this long overdue update, but I am aiming to get back into doing these more regularly. Next on the list of things to do is to finish off a few of the remaining art style changes, such as the various particle effects and the grass meshes. We're also going to update the UI damage indicator, as the all gauge health bar method is no longer fit for purpose. So if you'd like to keep up with the progress, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on my next update, and give us a thumbs up if you found this interesting. If you'd like to give the game a try, then check out the link in the description to the game's Steam page, where you can play the demo for free. And don't forget to wishlist it so you'll be notified when the game is released. If you got this far, then thanks for listening, and I'll see you again next time.